All right, there will be no long introduction today because we have a lot to get in through from a very eventful Friday here at Oracle Park as the Giants lose to the Tampa Bay Rays 7-6. That's their sixth consecutive loss. They have now lost 14 of their last 15 games at home. That is the first time that they've done that since 1901. But before getting into the game, and it was a very interesting game for a myriad of different reasons. There's a decent amount to get into as far as the pregame. The headliner being that Matt Chapman was placed on the 10-day injured list, retroactive to, I believe, August 13th, with right hand inflammation. And if you remember, that was the injury. That was the same hand that Chapman injured early this year. I want to say it was June 8th. When he slid back into first base, injured the right hand initially, missed about a month, came back, and just quite hasn't been the same player offensively that he was prior to the injury. Before the injury, he had an 812 OPS. Since the injury, I want to say it's a 655 OPS. He received 2 cortisone shots in the right hand. He's not going to do any type of baseball activity for 2 to 3 days, and the hope is that Chapman is going to be able to spend the minimum amount of time on the injured list. And following the game, we had an opportunity to talk with Chapman about the injury. And to kind of summarize that conversation, essentially Chapman has been, playing through this injury the entirety of the time that he's been back. He hasn't been quite 100%, but for the first couple of weeks, the right hand, it was at least manageable. But over the last couple of weeks, it's progressively gotten worse. It's progressively gotten more sore. And over the last couple of days in particular, he just basically has not been able to use his right hand when it comes to swinging the bat, and it just got to a point where they needed to evaluate him, and that's where we are right now with Matt Chapman. He's going to be on the injured list for, again, at the minimum 10 days. He wasn't in the lineup on Wednesday, was obviously not in the lineup today, and he said that with his right hand, he kind of accepted that from the time that he went on the injured list, he just was not going to feel 100% for the remainder of the season. When he was asked why he decided to come back so early, or not early necessarily, but why he decided to come back after a month, given that this is an injury that typically takes maybe 2 to 3 months to fully recover, he said that he got medical clearance from the doctors. He believed he was good enough to play. And again, given that I want to say it was July 5th when he returned from the initial injury. That was well before the current free fall that the Giants are currently in. The Giants were well within the mix for a wild card spot. So obviously, completely different set of circumstances when Chapman returned from that initial injury. When it comes to the long-term diagnosis, prognosis, whatever the term is, for Chapman's injury, he believes that once he gets to the offseason, he'll be fine. Once he has the opportunity to let it fully rest, when he's not playing in games. But regardless of how much time he ends up missing, regardless of when he comes back from the injured list, he knows that right hand is going to be something that he's going to have to just continue to manage over the course of the regular season. And again, it's not going to be 100%. I believe the way that he said it was, he always knew that it wasn't going to be perfect, but he wants to play in as many. I think he said he has goals to hit as far as how many games he wants to play. The team, he still wants to win. The Giants are still only 5 games out of the last wild card spot, which is something that he pointed out. He made sure to point out. But, as far as the right hand, it's just going to have to be something that he deals with going forward. Now, the person that just instantly makes sense to replace Chapman at third base is Casey Schmidt. We saw him do this exact same thing earlier this year. And kind of jumping a little bit ahead as far as the game, Casey Schmidt just had another very unfortunate bout of luck as he was hit in the right forearm, or I guess like right about right here with a pitch. Instantly goes down. It kind of ricocheted off the forearm and hit him in the section you don't want to get hit, but that was not the primary injury. It hits him, again, right over here in the forearm injury. The x-rays come back negative, but manager Bob Melvin did say after the game that Schmidt is probably going to miss a couple days. And the hope is that there isn't another situation like what happened earlier this year where he got hit in the hand area and, it looked like he was going to be good enough to be placed in the starting lineup. I think it was during that White Sox series where he was placed in the starting lineup a couple times before ultimately being scratched and then ultimately having to go on the injured list anyhow. So whether it was the foul tip off of, I think it was the shin, the foot, the hit by pitch off the hand, the hit by pitch off the forearm now. It's just been a couple of very unfortunate bouts of luck for Schmidt, who was actually one of the Giants' hotter bats in recent days. I think over his last 10 games, he had an OPS somewhere in the range of 900. So it's going to be a while before we see Schmidt again. Not a while, but it's going to be a couple days before we see Schmidt again, assuming that, it's best case scenario and that the forearm injury heals. I would imagine in the time being, we're probably going to see Casey Schmidt we're going to see Christian Koss over at third base. He did fill in for Schmidt over at third base once Schmidt departed from the game. I believe Tyler Fitzgerald, that probably makes him the backup right now as far as third base goes, but for the time being, we'll probably see a good amount of Christian Koss over at third base. We will probably not be seeing Rafael Devers over at third base, if any of you were thinking that. A little more housekeeping before getting into the game itself. Ryan Walker goes on the paternity list. Keaton Wynn gets reinstated. Ryan Walker is going to be on the paternity list for only about 3 days, so we'll probably see him when the team goes to San Diego. And then Eric Miller, he was slated to throw a bullpen. Let me actually check that right now. He was slated to throw again today. He threw yesterday. Let's see if I can look this up fast. I'm going to assume that he did pitch again today. Let's see here. So yeah, Eric Miller did in fact pitch again today. Melvin said that they were going to bring him in on Sunday, evaluate him, and assuming all things go well, he's probably going to be activated for the Giants series against the Padres in San Diego. Now, as far as the game itself, again, the Giants lose to the Tampa Bay Rays 7-6. It was a kind of... It's almost like a tale of two different games. The first 3 innings, to me, were very reminiscent of the style of baseball that the Giants played in April. And what I mean by that is they stole bases, they had extra base hits, and they were hitting with runners in scoring position. In the bottom of the first inning, Willie Adames reaches base with the walk, steals second, and then scores on, I want to say it was a 3-2 slider that Dominic Smith flips into left field. In the bottom of the second inning, Jung-Hoo Lee reaches base on what I believe was a single. He steals second base and then scores on a double by Christian Koss. And that marked the first game that the Giants have had since June 8th where they've had multiple steals in the same game. And then in the bottom of the third, Willie Adames takes on right center field, hits a solo homer over the Visa sign, his 19th homer of the year. And so through those first 3 innings, the Giants score 6 runs. They're 3 for 6 with runners in scoring position. They're swiping bases. It's just very emblematic of, or very symbolic rather, of the brand of baseball that they were playing in the month of April. And then the remaining 6 innings, they don't score a single run. And they had their opportunities to tack on, most notably in the bottom of the 8th inning. They load the bases with no outs. Casey Schmidt leads off that inning again by getting hit in the right forearm, ends up having to leave the game. Jung-Hoo Lee singles, and then Christian Koss gets hit as well when trying to lay down a sacrifice bunt. So Giants have bases loaded, no outs, golden opportunity. And what ends up happening is Patrick Bailey lines out to shortstop Hassan Kim. Drew Gilbert hits into a force out, goes 3-2. And then Elliot Ramos hits into an inning-ending force out. They get nothing out of it. And then in the top of the 9th inning, the Rays end up scoring a run off Randy Rodriguez, who hadn't pitched, I want to say, since August 8th. It had been more than a week since he had pitched. And quite frankly, he just hasn't had too many opportunities to pitch if Melvin is saving him specifically for late-game scenarios. A fun little moment kind of to get away from kind of the negativity of today's game. A fun little moment is that in Major League history, there have been only 5 players who have had the last name Seymour, and 3 of them were in today's game, that being the Giants' Carson Seymour, as well as the Rays' Ian Seymour and Bob Seymour. Bob Seymour, in particular, making his Major League debut, all of them being rookies, and appropriately enough, we had an opportunity for Carson Seymour to face Bob Seymour, who is a first baseman. Also, just want to put it out there that that's a name more for 1925 than 2025. But very appropriate that Bob Seymour's first time reaching base in the majors in any capacity comes from drawing a walk off of Carson Seymour.